Satnam, yogis, yoginis, hello, welcome, namaste, welcome to the Yoga Sutras chapter 2. This is like the season 2 of the Yoga Sutras. I'm very excited. I've been looking forward to this. The season 2 is Sadhana Pada. That's the practice, the section on practice. And as much as I like philosophy, I like when it's philosophy applied. So not that the first part was only philosophy, but it's like everything that has been building up about samadhi and how interesting it is if we get there, and chitta vritti nirodha, the waves calming down. Now, okay, how do we do this? So now is when we go into the practice and the details on that. So that's very exciting. I've been looking forward to starting with this. And so we're going to go straight away with the 2.1 and I think we're going to be able to cover 2.1 and 2.2. 2.2 is actually very, very short, but let's see how we deal with the 2.1 first. And let's go straight into that. Let me use this one here, first of all. So 2.1, yoga, tapa, swadhyaya, Ishvara pranidhana, Kriya Yoga. And the translation that Swami Ganeshwara does on this, sorry, I have the other book here in case I want to put it on. So the translation he gives is yoga in the form of action, that's Kriya Yoga, has 3 parts: training and purifying the senses, he calls it tapas, self-study in the context of teachings, swadhyaya, and devotion and letting go into the creative source from which we emerged, Ishvara pranidhana. Well, here, as usual, Swami Ganeshwara, he is already giving a little bit more of explanation on the different terms. And if you access their website, then you have much more material as well to go in detail into these 3. But let's take just the words by themselves. Tapa, which also connects to tapas, yeah. Swadhyaya, Ishvara pranidhana, this is Kriya Yoga. So here we go. Today we're going to go straight into finding out what is Kriya Yoga from the perspective of Patanjali, and we're going to compare it a little bit to some other possible lines of understanding of what Kriya Yoga is, more classical or modern, like Yogananda's. And I'm not an expert in Kriya Yoga at all. I haven't practiced it. My sister has, but I wish we could talk to her to ask her a little bit more details. But I will say how much I know, and then you will, if you have practiced it, you can let me know if we're going in the right path, or maybe there's something else that you can contribute with. But for now on, let's just start with Patanjali's definition of Kriya Yoga, and he gives these 3 components: tapas, and tapas will be the heat, the fire; swadhyaya, and that's the study or self-study or studying; and the Ishvara pranidhana. Regarding the third aspect, we already touched upon it quite a bit in an earlier sutra when we were in the first chapter. Where was it? Well, I don't remember which was the exact sutra that we talked about this. Hold on a second. Oh yes, that was 1.23. Okay, so in 1.23, in the first chapter, in the Sutra 23, it's this concept of Ishvara pranidhana is already introduced, and that's the concept of devotion and surrender. That's the faith. So that's going to be very interesting. But now it's also expanded. He said, well, look, that is one of the 3 aspects that form Kriya Yoga. So let me just write it down on a piece of paper, and we're going to come from here. I'm not going to really do a drawing, I think, but I want to put it like this. Well, let me show the camera. So the suggestion from Patanjali is that as we go into Kriya Yoga, there is 3 aspects, and one is tapa. He writes tapaha, but it's basically like tapas. Yeah? This could be like 1 or W, it doesn't matter. Sodhaya. And Ishvara Pranidhana. And I've observed something very interesting about this. I'm gonna go slowly into this, but look, fire, heat up. Now there is a number of translations for this word, and some of them are less modern translations, let's say, and there's different ways of understanding it. I'm going to read a little bit of a paragraph from another book, Swami Satchidananda's book, which you should already be familiar if you've been following this series of videos. And he gives a very interesting interpretation. But traditionally, tapas basically means fire. This is fire. It's heat. Let's say heat up, to warm up. Now, that is a fire that is generally associated with the physical body. So tapas is generally more aligned with the physical body, that is the heat that you generate through your actions, your practice, the things that you are doing, that's creating a fire. And the way I learned it the first time I heard about this, I remember this saying, this is the heat that is burning up your karmas. These seeds of karmas that are latent in the deepest layers of our being, subconscious and conscious down there. And these samskaras are burned up, and the seeds are, you burn them to release them so that you find liberation from them. Yes, so the fire of your practice, the zeal and the motivation and intention and intensity with which you do your practice, that's a heat that is going to be burning up your karma. So that is the first understanding that I got from this word tapas. And there is other translations. One that is often used is austerities as well. And I think that's a classical way of understanding it, a much more ascetic line, and thinking that we have to do austere things to the body to somehow find some spiritual connection through austerities of the body. And so, but let me read what Swami Satchidananda has to say about this. So this is the book that I've been recommending. And here we go with this little section here. Tapas also refers to self-discipline. Normally the mind is like a wild horse tied to a chariot. Imagine the body is the chariot, the intelligence is the charioteer, the mind is the reins, and the horses are the senses. The self, or the true you, is the passenger. If the horses are allowed to gallop without reins or charioteer, the journey will not be safe for the passenger. Right? So, okay, I said I was not particularly going to do a drawing, but now I cannot avoid it. The image is too good to pass. So let's do this. I'm going to risk drawing a horse. Let's try that. Be patient with me. Oh, this is going to look more like a camel. Okay. This is the best that I can do today. All right, this should be like this. Okay, we have a kind of weird horse. And here we have, these are the reins that go to this chariot. And driving this chariot, here we have a charioteer. Now, and then there's the passenger. Put him a little bit lower. Okay, so who are these elements? Well, the horse is, in this metaphor the senses. The reins are the mind. The charioteer, it should be, the way Swami Satchidananda describes it is the mind is, what is that? The intelligence. What is it? The intelligence is the charioteer. But I'm not going to say intelligence. I'm going to write buddhi. The more purified aspect of the mind that helps us make conscious decisions. And And this is the self. This is the Atman. Yes, the Atman. And the metaphor is that if you let the wild horses go as they wish, if the senses go here and there, we don't go anywhere. We are losing our energy and our path, our direction. We are aimlessly going through life without knowing where are we going with it. And we need to utilize the mind to control those senses. But it is this intelligence who is regulating the mind and the senses. Well, maybe these elements can be changed. They can, in different metaphors, you will see different terms for these things. But I like this metaphor because it's something that reflects the Bhagavad Gita. Yeah? In the Bhagavad Gita, you have Krishna is the charioteer, so he will be the elevated, the awakened one, the Buddhi one. And he is driving Arjuna, and Arjuna is the self. This is us in ignorance waiting to wake up, waiting to realize who we are. And he's telling us this, look, you have to control your horses. You have to, in a way, control your mind, control your senses, so that they don't go aimlessly and you don't lose the opportunity of this lifetime and you go towards your goal. And then in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is telling Arjuna, how could we do that? And he's giving him the instruction of yoga. So it's going to be very relevant, and we're going to go into that in a moment. So what Swami Satchidananda is saying is that tapas is this self-discipline that is holding the reins of the horse. Let's continue. Although control of the senses and organs often seems to bring pain in the beginning, it eventually ends in happiness. If tapas is understood in this light, we will look forward to the pain. We will even thank people who cause it, since they are giving us the opportunity to steady our minds and burn out impurities. Burn out impurities. So this is this concept of burning out. We go into this tapas, this idea of tapas. And you can see it in a different way. I mentioned first, the first understanding I got is tapas is the fire that burns the karmas. You can see it as impurities. You can see like the different impure aspects that are deep into the subconscious and the even down to the unconscious. You can see the heat that is produced by rubbing. When you have two things that are rubbing each other, like two rocks in the sea, and by the ocean, by the waves, the movement of the waves and the water, they are rubbing each other until they eventually become fully smooth. And that's a very interesting metaphor and image that can tell us how we are when we are in relationship with somebody. We have our own edges, our rugged parts, and then as we rub with each other, hopefully through this friction, hopefully we become softer, and this more like polished version of ourselves. Relationships are like the waves in the sea that are going to help moving these pebbles, and wherever you are struggling, that's the heat that you feel in the struggling. That's the rubbing of the different edges that is going to become smooth and softer. So the heat of our practice, the practices are similar in this way. You do your yoga, your asanas, your meditation, and sometimes you don't want to meditate. Sometimes you are lazy and you feel sick or whatever we feel. That is a challenge for us to do the practice. We need to build up our courage and our zeal and our determination, our discipline, our commitment, and that takes fire. And so then you go into the practice, and it takes also the fire to hold the actual practice. And that fire is going to be helping to remove your impurities and smoothing up the edges and so on. There's also something about fire that I find very, very interesting, but I'm not going to go into detail today with this concept, but that's the idea of alchemy, internal alchemy. And if we look at our body, this is our heart. This will be the body. And here is the diaphragm. And here we have the navel. Well, the fire builds up here around the navel. And there is a number of practices that we do to increase the inner fire through the breath, through the pranayama, like, for example, breath of fire. And that heat is being held in the in the diaphragm, is warming up this. You could see this is like a big cauldron. And inside this big cauldron, like the diaphragm, you can see this curve going up and down. As you are breathing, it goes up and it goes down. So it becomes like this cauldron. And within it, we have the heart. And so, like when you have a metal, when you have a rock, and you want to remove all the impurities, heat is one of the best ways to do that. When you are, with water, you can remove some of the earth if you wish. But then all these metals that are attached to it, and then you have a mixture of things that are not pure. When you apply heat, you can melt away a lot of the impurities and, for example, find the gold, so refine the gold. So the process of becoming like a heart of gold, let's say a shining heart of gold, it requires this heat from below. And there is something about prana and apana and this exchange. I would say this is a lot about transmutation and a lot about alchemy, internal alchemy, that is turning lead to gold. Lead is something very heavy, like when we have a very heavy heart, transforming it into a heart of gold. And the internal practice of pranayama and other ones like meditation. But through the fire of our practice, through these tapas that we are talking, then you are turning the heart to gold. And it makes me think about also the meaning of Khalsa, the word Khalsa for the Sikhs. Sikhs generally have the name Kaur for women and Singh for men. And then if they are part of the Khalsa, they're part of their community and they take Sikh vows, they call themselves like that, Khalsa. Khalsa means something that is pure and unalloyed, meaning it's not an alloy. An alloy is when two metals are joined together. And generally the karas would be made of one single element, generally iron. Mine particularly is not going to work because I have gold inscribed on top. I like the idea of the gold here to remind me of the Mul Mantra, which is the mantra that I have inscribed here. And that's kind of like the gold that we are looking for in the alchemy. And I always wear it in my hand. So that's the hand with which I do things. That's not a coincidence as well, because I'm right-handed. So when I'm going to do something, any action is kar. Ek onkar, kar means creation. So any creation, any creative action that you do in the world, it's not me. There is something reminding me that it's God doing it through me. And whatever merit comes out of that action, it's God's. But also any blame, that's also God's. So I'm not going to take anything out of the result of any dharmic action. If it's a dharmic action, there is no karma involved. We talked about this when we were exploring Sabija Samadhi, the last Samadhi when you are with no seed. Sorry, not Sabija, Nirbija Samadhi. So when there is no seed, means there is no more karmas. If you're in the path of Dharma, then you're not creating any more karma. So if you do a righteous action from the Dharma, then whatever action comes out of this has no reaction, meaning you don't accumulate karma. Well, isn't that Kriya Yoga? Isn't that Kriya? Because the root of the word Kri, you will recognize this is Kar. And Kar is action. So the very name of Kriya Yoga is telling us that it's a yoga in action. And let's not forget, this is the 2.1. Let me put it in big here. Sorry, I turned the light. This is 2.1, which means that the very first practice that Patanjali is telling us, we are just starting Sadhanapada, the second chapter. The very first practice he suggests, the very first Kriya Yoga is Kriya Yoga. And it's this. He's not going straight into the yamas and the niyamas and the pranayama and all that. We will go into that, but not yet. So in a way, Patanjali is telling us, look, start with this. Don't forget about this. And this is a path of action. It's a Kriya Yoga. It's a path that is linked to some form of action. Okay, so let's go back here. Tapa, then it's a fire, and it's something that it's in your practice and is generally associated to what's happening within your body. So I'm gonna write it here. body. And there was something else in this book. Let me read it as well because it was very interesting. I was reading this morning these details. In the 17th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna, which is, it's not a coincidence that he just utilized the metaphor of the chariot and now he's talking about the Bhagavad Gita, right? Lord Krishna talks about tapasya. Tapasya is the heat. He says, those who practice severe austerities, not enjoined by the scriptures, who are given to hypocrisy and egoism, impelled by the forces of lust and attachment, you will recognize he's identifying some of the challenges, egoism, lust, and attachment, who are senseless, who torture all the elements in the body, and me, also who dwells, this me is the self, the Atman, also who dwells in the body, and remember we're talking about the body, tapas is in the body, know thou these to be a demoniacal resolves. So you may do all these severe austerities with the greatest of ambitions and the best of your intentions. Well, if you do it in that way, that's a demoniacal resolve. That's an incredible thing, eh? In the name of tapasya, people sometimes practice all sorts of self-torture. In the East, there are sadhus, ascetics, who lie on beds of nails or keep one arm raised in the air so the arm gets thinner and thinner and finally decays. They are all just forms of self-torture. Lord Krishna himself says that these people are demons because they disturb the pure self who dwells within their bodies. Self-discipline is an aid to spiritual progress, whereas self-torture is an obstacle. Let me just here bring a little concept. If anybody doesn't know, we are doing a series of podcasts where psychologists from India and I, Satseva or Jnana, we have a conversation about different concepts with the theme of relationships. And last week we had a conversation on karma and and forgiveness. And one of the concepts that came up, and I was trying to reinforce this point, highlighting this point, that partly through my Catholic background, but that this is actually very common, we do something and maybe we perceive that it was wrong. So I am to blame, I feel guilty about it, and therefore I have to be punished. And then there is this idea of mea culpa. It is my fault and I have to punish, and I have to do some form of punishment. Now, this punishing of the body is not different from this kind of ritual, ascetic, extreme austerities that Krishna is talking about, that these are demoniacal. Because if you did something, let's say just that you did something that caused some suffering to somebody else. Okay, well, you did that. Okay, you recognize yourself. Oh, wow, look at what I did. That was not nice. And you know what? That was heavy karma for me. Okay, good. You're going to receive that karma. No matter what you do in your life, that karma is coming. So the karma is going to go, whatever you did is going to come back. But now, if you start punishing yourself for that and going through all sorts of things which sometimes we are not conscious that we are punishing ourselves from that, but out of guilt, how many times do we deprive ourselves from having satisfaction or joy or happiness in our lives? And we feel that because I feel guilty, I don't deserve that. So when a good opportunity comes in front of us, we feel ashamed that we should even think of taking it, because shame goes very much with the guilt. And so I'm not going to take it because I don't deserve it. Well, all those self-punishing attitudes, that's going against your nature. It's going against us, which means that now I'm creating even more karma by punishing myself for that. So that's how Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, that's demoniacal, because it utilizes some concept that you may think it makes sense, and it actually goes against you. No? So, I did something wrong, I am guilty, and then I am at fault, and I have to be punished, so I'm going to punish myself. And you create karma by doing something wrong, then you create karma by punishing yourself. And it doesn't help. So that's a pretty nasty place, yeah? these are all forms of self-torture. And Lord Krishna himself says that these people are demons because they disturb the pure self who dwells within their body. So the body is like a shrine for the self, and we should respect the body. And that's why how important it is to take care of the body. And even Buddha, who did these austerities, he spent 40 days, no eating, no drinking. And then when he came out on the other side, and thank goodness he got liberated, but not everybody does, right? Some die in the desert looking for liberation. And what was his conclusion? Don't go to the extremes, find the middle path. So those who have reached there, even through austerities as well, however blessed they were that they managed to get there, when they get there, they tell us, don't do the extreme practices. So on one side, we have this line, we should not want to practice these extreme austerities. And at the same time, we have Satchidananda is telling us, look, some practices bring pain in the beginning, even if it eventually ends in happiness. Having to get up early in the morning and having your cold shower and having the asanas and doing some meditation and maybe losing hours of sleep, that's painful as well. And it's difficult to regulate how much am I doing that as a punishment to myself, like a subconscious punishment, because I feel I'm not good enough and I should work harder. So I do my practice, even the yoga, as a punishment. So we have to be really careful with these lines. How do we do this practice, this tapas, this fire? Because the fire can warm up, can heat up the bowl where the heart is and remove all the impurities, but the fire also burns. So we have to be careful how we employ that tapas. And a good way to understand what is the right proportion and what is the right way to do this tapas, that is going to come through Swadhyaya. Swadhyaya is study. And this study, let me see, it can be said in a number of ways. It can be said like study of scriptures, study of sacred, spiritual, religious texts that are going to be guiding you through the path. Studying the Yoga Sutras, for example, what we are doing right now, this is Swadhyaya. And you can also look at it in both directions. I always like to look things in both directions. So when it's saying study of writings, study of texts, study of stories, study of histories, we should look at it outside and we should look at it inside as well. So Swadhyaya will mean, yes, I'm studying scriptures and texts out there in the exterior scriptures, so reading books, for example, but also inside, so reading my own book. How was my story? How was my history? And what kind of narratives do I have that are still, I'm carrying them from my back, from the past, and they are toxic, and I should purify them. I should apply the tapas to clean up those things from the past. This concept of narratives also came up in the podcast. If anybody's interested in the podcast, you can look for it in Spotify or other places like this. The videos are also on YouTube. I put a link in the community tab. This is the safe space is creating these podcasts, and the podcasts are called Soul and Science. So maybe you're interested in looking at those, because we talk about these narratives from the past, the history that we have from when we are children, and how is that affecting us today. So this Swadhyaya is not just about studying external texts, but also my internal text. What do I say about myself? And can I reformulate, revisit and remodel or reframe whatever happened to me? But generally it will be about reading, studying, and studying also in the Eastern way, not so much in the Western way, which is just reading the book in a way that you accumulate knowledge and information and you become like a walking library. Some people are like little walking libraries, but that's not exactly what it means. In Swadhyaya means you read something and then you reflect upon it, and then you meditate upon it, and then maybe you read it again, and then you read it again. And it will also include chanting mantras, because mantras are just one line which contains the essence of a lot of wisdom, which has been distilled, or maybe this is a little drop of gold that has been alchemically created. And the essence of a big teaching is just in that one little drop of gold, and maybe it's, Om Namah Shivaya or the Mul Mantra or one of these mantras that you just have to repeat it again and again and again and again and again. And that is your way of studying as well. So it's not an intellectual study. It's a study that is going to help transform the mind as well. Because Kar will relate to action, but it's also about the form. Yeah? So it's going to be transforming the mind. So tapas was mainly about the body, and swadhyaya is about the mind. Okay? External books, internal books, self-reflection, and study. And Isvara Pranidhana, we talked about this already in the first chapter when we were talking about devotion. And I dedicated a long time to talk about Ishvara, but we can just say it's the divinity, is God. You can talk about it in that way. And Pranidhana, the word literally means surrender. So just like I was saying with this, whatever I do, if that has a beautiful consequence, it's not mine. It's not my merit, right? I give it to God. So whatever actions you are initiating, and remember, this is the yoga of action, Kriya Yoga. Whatever actions come out of that, I surrender them to God, which is a way of non-attached to them, not being attached to them, right? Do you remember in the first chapter, one of the two main critical concepts that Patanjali emphasizes are the keeping up with the practice, abhyasa, and letting go of the results. That's the vairagya. So Isvara Pranidhana, in a way, this surrendering things to God and including the merit of your actions and the hoping to get some sort of reaction out of what you do, or you do something for someone, you expect them to say thank you, for example. That's not surrender, right? That's an attachment to what you hope to achieve out of that interaction. Well, Isvara Pranidhana is about just surrender everything, but do your action, right? You do your action, your duty, you do your dharmic action that Krishna is telling us how much. He's telling us, look, this is a yoga of action. You have to do the actions. You cannot just be passive, because that's the whole crux of the Bhagavad Gita. We reach the battlefield and there is this Arjuna he's in the chariot and he's looking at the battlefield. He looks at the two sides. They're going to fight. And he's the prince of one of the sides, and he says, look, I don't want to fight. But that passivity is going to lead him to a karmic path. So this is where Krishna is telling him, look, there has to be some action. You have to do your duty. That's the main concept of the Bhagavad Gita. So, tapas works on the body. Swadhyaya is about the mind, and Isvara Pranidhana, the letting go and surrender everything, is the path of the devotion, the path of the heart. Devotion to God and letting everything go and just giving it to God, and that's the heart. I find that very interesting, that there is these three levels, body, mind, and heart, to reach the highest yoga. That's the spirit. Okay. Well, having looked at this a little bit in detail, one more thing. I'm just thinking about this letting go. What does it mean, letting go? We were talking in another video not so long ago about this law of attraction, and we talked about the difference between scarcity, abundance, and prosperity. And I mentioned how prosperity is how much flows through you in your life, not how much you accumulate. And that goes also together with what you learn. So whatever you are learning, also whatever you are learning from this video, right? Whatever you learn in life, whatever you receive, you can try to accumulate it, which if you try to accumulate things, you are doomed to lose them because you form an attachment to them. And that's going to be a karmic path, and that's a path of scarcity, feeling that there's not enough, so I need to accumulate more. Or you can offer it to others, share it, letting it pass through you. That's the prosperity, yes? So Isvara Pranidhana is this attitude of the heart that whatever reaches here, I just offer it back. I just give it. And if I have time and energy and money, I can offer whatever, 10% of my time, 10% of my earnings, I offer them back and I give to charity or whatever you have to do this donation. So you donate your time, you donate your energy to help others who need it. So this sharing, you don't lose in the sharing. That's actually how you integrate it. Very often, until the moment that you share something with somebody, you don't really know how much you know it. They say if you would really want to check how much you know something, teach it. And that's the way that you're going to find out where are the holes in your understanding. So the sharing comes also into this concept of Isvara Pranidhana. But there we go. This is Kriya Yoga. And it combines these three elements. This is not yet the Raya Yoga, the Ashtanga path that Patanjali is going to cover later on in this chapter as well, in chapter 2, when he goes into the yamas and niyamas and all that. Now, how does this Kriya Yoga compare to other forms of yoga? Well, let's compare it first of all to what Krishna was saying in the Bhagavad Gita, because he does instruct to Arjuna, well, if you want to do your duty, this is the path of yoga. And then he gives a number of names for the yoga. And the names that Krishna is going to utilize in this path are going to be, let me put them in order, okay? It's Karma Yoga. There is, I'm going to put it here, Bhakti Yoga and Jnana Yoga. He calls the three Jnana, but then there is one more that it's also added. Sometimes you may find it, Dhyana. I would say that Dhyana, well, let me talk about the others first. First of all, karma. Karma is action, and Karma Yoga is generally utilized, is the term that we utilize to say that we do service. So we do some selfless action to serve others. Well, we were just saying about serving somebody, doing some action that can provide some service to somebody. Now, it's an action. It's something physical in the world, and it's through your physical body. But probably Karma Yoga is not only this, doing service, like going to a soup kitchen and helping. This is also about actions. What kind of actions you do in the world, and what kind of actions do you do in your body and with your body. So that's kind of connected. Jnana Yoga, it's also about the mind. It's a little bit different from Swadhyaya because it's not so much about studying scriptures, though certainly Jnana Yoga would include the study of scriptures, but it's a little bit more connected into the concept of self-inquiry. So it's utilizing the mind to inquire yourself about the nature of yourself, to find yourself, to become self-knowledgeable, to self-knowledge, finding self-knowledge, and eventually self-realization. So it's the path of the mind to help you in your path through self-inquiry to find the self. And you can utilize the scriptures, you can read, you can study, but that's in a way to apply to find the essence of who you are. So Jnana Yoga, and what we do here in the channel is Jnana Yoga. This is right now exploring the Yoga Sutras and talking about it. This is a kind of yoga. And as somebody was mentioning in the channel as well, this is not very different from meditation. You may think that this is just like a lecture or like an exposition, and you may take a very passive role and just listen to it, or you can put it in the background if it helps, you are doing other things. But if you listen attentively and you are integrating the concepts as we are talking about it, then that can help to transform you. And now, what is a meditation? A meditation is space in which you empty yourself and you're listening to your soul and transforming all these elements that are an obstacle to reaching your soul, and your mind gets refined, your energy awakens, your heart feels inspired. Well, that's not very different from something that can happen in an interaction like this. So even though it may seem very innocuous, you're just listening to a YouTube video. If you take it with the right attitude, and if you listen with the right intention, as you are applying to yourself, this is yoga. This is Gyan Yoga. So, and Bhakti is the path of devotion. So this is again the heart. So see how these three are like the three legs of a stool. And these three elements are supreme elements that Krishna will be teaching Arjuna. And there is one section in the Bhagavad Gita, I wrote it down today not to forget, it was 5.4, where he says, both the renunciation of action through Jnana Yoga and the yoga of action through Karma Yoga lead to liberation, but of the two, the yoga of action is superior. So the karma is superior. Which is interesting because Patanjali is telling us, well, look, yes, okay, feed your mind and, open your heart, work on your body. This is all fine, but do your actions. Actions are matter. Actions are important. Passivity is very often a path towards hell. Yeah, we have path towards heaven and towards hell. You can see it like that. And the first step towards hell is passive expectancy, being passive and hoping for the world to entertain you. And this life is to have fun and let me, is that hedonistic approach, philosophy in life? Just let's enjoy life like that. Well, there has to be some actions, and those actions will create fire and they will require discipline and so on. I don't want to repeat myself. Well, there is this fourth aspect is the path of dhyana yoga. Dhyana means meditation. Some of you may know it already, but this will come in later on when we go into the Ashtanga path, the 8 steps that Patanjali talks about. So this is Patanjali, this is Bhagavad Gita, this is Krishna. And Krishna is saying, well, there is the body, there is the heart, there is the mind, and there is also the path of meditation. And we're going to see that Patanjali said, well, look, this is Kriya Yoga, these 3 aspects. And then a few pages later on, he will say, well, now let's talk about dhyana. Let's talk about the path that takes us to samadhi. And dhyana is the last step before samadhi. So if we are talking about samadhi, dhyana is the path, not the meditation. So that's very significant that, in a way, Patanjali has included the concepts from the Bhagavad Gita, and again, he has been much more descriptive and much more step-by-step and giving more details on how to do those steps. But it's basically the same. It's perfectly congruent. Excuse me. Hydration time. So this is what the Bhagavad Gita has to say. And there is some quote in the Bhagavad Gita also saying how when you offer the inhale of the breath into the outgoing of the breath and vice versa, the yogi neutralizes both the inhale and the outgoing and releases the life force from the heart and brings it under control. And this sentence, this is generally attributed to the concept of Kriya Yoga. This is the explanation that the Krishna is giving to Kriya Yoga, and he's talking about liberating the energy from the heart, but it's utilizing the breath. The breath is going to be connected to the body as well, and then the control is being the mind. Yeah, the mind is the one who should be in control, like controlling the senses. So very, very interesting. There is a number of points from the Bhagavad Gita that are supporting this concept of Kriya Yoga. But the first time I heard about Kriya Yoga was not this one, was not Patanjali, was not Krishna, it was actually Yogananda. So I would like to do this little reference, and I mentioned at the beginning, I didn't practice this yoga, so I don't know exactly what is in there. From what I heard from my sister and something a little bit, I looked online. First of all, if you really want to go into the details of the practice, you have to be initiated. And if you have to be initiated, you have to have practice for, I think, a whole year of the basics. Now, the basics, I know which they are. There's a number of energization exercises that he made up to export the yoga to the West, but he would be trying to distill the essence of what the yoga asanas do so that the body is healthy and powerful and energetic so that we can do the meditations. So in a way, it's not very different from the asanas and the effect that they have. But I remember my sister telling me how you are tensing parts of the body and relaxing them and bringing the focus to one arm and bringing the prana in that region and opening the nadis and so on. So that's one part of the work from the Kriya Yoga practice that Yogananda was teaching. There is the Hong So technique of concentration and breathing pranayama, which is you are inhaling, and I think it's inhaling in 8, bringing the breath to the eyebrows and exhaling in 8, which is a way to train yourself to concentrate so that later you can meditate. And utilizing prana, you are building up your energy, pranayama, and also stimulating the third eye so that you can have intuitive perceptions of the path that you are following. Then there is the Om technique. There's some meditation on Om. And if you read Yogananda's translation of this Yoga Sutra 2.1, I don't have it here right now. I should have prepared it. But I remember that Yogananda talks about tapas as the body part, as the physical body, the effort that you do in the body. Swadhyaya, the study Swadhyaya. And Ishvara Pranidhana, he calls it the recitation of Om. Because for him, to call to God, to surrender to God, the devotion to God is through Om. You will remember that Patanjali also mentioned that in the previous chapter. He said that it's 1.29 or something like that. He said the devotion is done through the Om. So when you are chanting Om and you are meditating on Om, that's your way to surrender and to experience the devotion in your heart. So in Kriya Yoga, you will have, from Yogananda I'm talking now, there is some work on the body, like some asanas and making efforts, and then some concentration of the mind through this breathing technique of the Hong So, and then there is meditation on the Om, which is kind of connected to the heart as well. And then comes the actual Kriya Yoga technique, which I don't know the details, because as I mentioned, you have to be initiated to know them. I have a feeling from things that I've read from Yogananda and other practitioners who were commenting on their practice, that is something that you do a number of cycles within you. And I have a feeling, but please, if anybody knows, do correct me. If you know it, please write it in the chat or write it in the comments of this video. I would like to know. And not that I'm going to start doing that practice without having done the introduction, because that's not, I think it's better to follow the steps as it's given. But just to find out, to have it more clear. But as far as I know, my feeling, my intuition is that there is some breathing through the nadis, probably rising through the chakras, maybe associating the chakras to the planets, and doing some sort of movement with the energy, I imagine similar to what I guided on the last time. The last day that I had, I think it was last Thursday, we had this, how do you call it? The video is called The Language of God. And we did the macrocosmic orbit meditation with the breath. I imagine it's something similar to that. And I think you do a number of repetitions. I don't know the details. I imagine there's going to be maybe Hong So as well, or some mantra So Hang, or some mantra vibrating, I imagine. But this is a meditation practice. So Yogananda has its very own characteristics, its very own style that he developed, coming from what he learned from his teachers, Yuktesvar, but also adapting it to the West with these tensing energization exercises. So he adapted it a little bit. But if you read through the lines, between the lines, you understand that there is something happening in the body, there's something about the mind, there's something happening in the heart, there's something for the spirit. So it's basically Kriya Yoga. Yeah, this is what Kriya Yoga, as Patanjali defined it, is just taking a very particular, specific form, the way he teaches those techniques. And I don't know more details about that. All right. So this is 2.1. Is really 2.2 is going to be super short today. I don't think we're going to go into much detail, because today this was like the introduction to the whole theme of the next chapter, but super important, the concept of Kriya Yoga. I'm happy to go into this as well. Somebody in in the chat here the last time we were doing the summary of the Yoga Sutras was asking about this. Somebody was asking me, what about the Kriya Yoga? I said, well, wait for it because it's coming next time. So this is the video where we talked about it. Let's do the second 2.2 because it's just going to be like the completion of the 2.1, and then we will go into 2.3 in the following week. Let's read here 2.2. Hold on a second. Let me move it up a little bit. Let's put it like this. So 2.2, the yoga of action, Kriya Yoga, is practiced to bring about samadhi and to minimize the colored thought patterns. Samadhi bhavana artha klesha tanu karanartaha cha. So you do Kriya Yoga, the yoga that we were just learning, with the three aspects, the tapas, swadhyaya, and isvara pranadhana. And through the practice of this Kriya Yoga, you can get to samadhi, and through that, you minimize these kleshas. Now, Swami Ganeshvara, this translation that you have on screen, klesha translated as the colored, and you will recognize that concept from the, let me bring the summary of chapter 1, klishta, the types of mental modifications. In 1.5 to 1.11, Patanjali says, look, there is 5 vrittis. Yeah, we say, yoga is when the chitta vrittis calm down. Well, which are these vrittis? Well, there's 5 of them, but these ones can be both klishta or aklishta. And we talked a lot about this in this video, the third video, if you want to check it, how klishta could be coloring, like the coloring of our thoughts, but it can also be suffering, like thoughts which cause suffering. And if you look at this word, klishta is the same root as kleshas. So it's basically the same. What we are doing now is we talked a lot about what is yoga, going to samadhi, and there's going to be suffering and so on. He said, well, now let's go into the practice and how we can remove this suffering. And so that's what we're going to be doing on the following videos. So don't miss it, because the following video is going to go into these kleshas or klishtas more in detail. And we're still on the practical realm of this of Yoga Sutras. For today, I think it's enough. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to press the like. It's a very little effort for you. It does a lot for the channel and for the video. It's useful to help it reach other people. And I appreciate every like, every subscription, every member. Thank you, everybody, for supporting the channel, making this possible. And it's really... Truly, it's my pleasure and my honor to be able to be in this position, and it's really good for me. I mean, I do this, and it's really useful to meditate and reflect, and it could be like a very egocentric thing that I'm doing as well, because this is for myself. I'm just doing it in front of the camera, and that's a good excuse for me to go and study this. So that's maybe not egocentric, but self-centric, which is not necessarily bad, Put yourself in the center. Yeah, I will say it's self-centered. But anyway, if you weren't there, then there would be no excuse for me to share it. So thank you, everybody, for watching. And until next time, Sat Nam.